This is one of my favorite topics as it is one of the more fun aspects of being a manager, and if done correctly, can have very positive downstream impacts on employee performance, satisfaction, and retention. Many managers do a good job in this space already, but they aren't necessarily doing a great one. Typically, you'll see most managers, though unfortunately not all, making some sort of effort to give general positive recognition tied to a recent output of effort or work, typically in the moment or shortly after it happens. For example, you might see a manager offer up praise for a presentation that went well or for a report that was well written. This is all positive and highly encouraged, but there is definitely more you can be doing as a manager to better recognize your team members. Broadly speaking, there are 3 forms of recognition you can leverage. The first of which is general recognition. While I've already touched on what this is in my introduction, I'd like to explain why this form of recognition is important. It's important because it signals to the employee that you are paying attention to the work they're doing, which inherently makes them feel valued. It's also something that you can do on a regular basis, as there are likely many opportunities to do this throughout any given week. Lastly, it's easy. It does not take much effort to say, "Great job on that presentation back there." The second form of recognition is what I call targeted recognition, and is where you can really crank up the effectiveness of the positive feedback you give employees. Be it in the moment or at a later date, such as in a performance review or in a regular one-on-one, you can use targeted recognition as a tool to reinforce certain desired behaviors or attributes in your employees. General recognition tends to be broad-based in nature and doesn't actually tell the employee what they did really well that you'd like them to be aware of and to continue to do moving forward. For example, let's say that during a recent presentation, your employee was very composed and engaged well with the audience. Rather than simply saying, "Great job on the presentation back there," crank it up a notch and say, "Great job on the presentation back there. You did a really nice job of engaging with the audience by encouraging participation and facilitating good dialogue. I also appreciate how composed you were, especially when you were handling some of the more challenging questions." See the difference? In this targeted recognition example, you would be letting the employee know where they really shined, which in turn will reinforce that behavior to continue moving forward, especially since they now know its valuable attribute given you took the time to recognize it. This principle can be applied to pretty much any attribute, skill, or behavior you want to recognize and reinforce or encourage your employees to continue to do. The key in all of this is to know the specific attributes you want to reinforce and provide recognition for with your employees, which may be different for each employee depending on their role, adeptness, and seniority. There is no right or wrong attribute. The goal is simply to be intentional with the attributes you do want to reinforce and be specific when calling them out. If you are a manager with employees who have performance issues or with whom you are actively supporting their development, this form of recognition can be very beneficial to help reinforce desired attributes and let them know what you value as a manager, but can also have the added benefit of showing the employee you are paying attention to their improvement, which can be very validating and reinforcing for the employee to continue their growth in that area. As both an employee and manager, you are likely familiar with the final form of recognition, commonly known as token recognition, which often comes in the form of swap bonuses or gifts. Essentially, you are being recognized by being given something beyond verbal affirmation. Generally speaking, token recognition should be reserved for situations where the manager wants to signify that the employee or team has done something exceptional or gone above and beyond for a prolonged period of time. While token recognition can be tied to some sort of attribute, it is more often used to recognize milestones, making it through extended periods of challenge, or as a way to help keep employees motivated during a difficult time. Let's take a look at some common reasons for providing token recognition. Working overtime for prolonged periods, navigating challenging situations such as COVID, getting a major project across the finish line, stepping up to support a colleague, hitting a career milestone such as making it to a certain level or being with the company for 10 years, hitting a personal milestone such as getting married or having a baby. Now let's take a look at some common examples of token recognition. Spot bonuses, thank you cards, gift certificates to food establishments, bringing coffee or donuts into the office, team lunches or dinners, dinner out with a spouse or any +1, paid time off, or internal company rewards. The next thing to consider after having decided on whether to use general, targeted, or token-based recognition is to determine the setting in which you'll provide it. Generally speaking, the vast majority of recognition will be done privately behind closed doors. On occasion, you'll see in-the-moment basic recognition in front of a group, but by and large, most feedback is done in a one-on-one setting. The reason for this is that you don't want to put someone in the spotlight who doesn't want to be there, and secondly, you also don't want to have others being jealous of the person's recognition if they don't feel it was warranted, or worse, they feel they should have the same recognition themselves. Sometimes positive recognition itself may be tied to a sensitive topic that the employee likely would not want others knowing about, such as showing improvement against a performance development plan, for example. Now, some industries tend to lean more towards public recognition as a motivation tool, which is particularly true in sales, where the nature of the roles are highly competitive. However, for most teams, you generally want people working together rather than in competition with each other. So best practice is to typically provide individual recognition in small groups or in private. In private doesn't have to mean a dedicated meeting. It can mean over email, in one-on-ones, in passing in the hallway, or through instant messaging. The goal is simply to not have others around when providing the feedback. Having all this been said, public recognition is best used to provide positive recognition at the team level. You will often see this in company communications, large department meetings, or in town halls where a group of people have hit major milestones or accomplished something exceptional. Here, no one individual is being recognized, but rather a group of people who collectively are not in competition with other departments or teams are getting their moment in the spotlight. While recognition is welcomed at pretty much any time by employees, the general rule of thumb is that the more timely the recognition, the more effective it is. My recommendation is that you look to provide it as close to the moment as possible. Ideally, you are giving recognition within a week's time, unless the recognition is of a significant nature or is tied to a significant event that the employee will be hard-pressed to forget. The exception to this rule is team-based or token recognition. This form of recognition tends to be tied to longer time horizons, so in-the-moment recognition tends to not apply. While you can of course provide token recognition as often as you like, my experience has shown that this form of recognition is best used on a quarterly basis at most, unless tied to a personal or career milestone, such as getting married or hitting a 10-year mark. Now that you are aware of how recognition can be used in an effective way and the different forms of it, it can be very tempting to go out there and start doing lots of positive recognition with your staff. As with most things in life, you can definitely have too much of a good thing. It can be very easy to constantly praise your employees, but this can quickly come off as you being inauthentic and disingenuous, which will lead to the recognition losing its value and will ultimately hurt your reputation and credibility as a manager in the long run. You need to provide recognition, but it cannot be constant. Ideally, you are really focusing on calling out specific behaviors or attributes you want to reinforce. This approach will naturally lead you to be more selective in the nature of your feedback and how often you give it. In an ideal world, I recommend in-the-moment general recognition a few times a week if the opportunity presents itself. 1 to 2 points of targeted recognition in one-on-ones is warranted, and then token recognition 1 to 4 times a year at either the team or individual level. In summary, recognition is a fundamental skill for all managers to master and leverage to help get the most out of their employees, and can be both a great motivational and developmental tool when used appropriately. Remember that there are 3 main forms of recognition. General, which is best used informally. Targeted, which is best used to reinforce and reward desired attributes and behaviors. And token, which is best used to recognize exceptional circumstances. The major thing to keep in mind in all of this is to be certain that the feedback is warranted to ensure its continued value and usefulness. So go out there and have fun recognizing your team for all the great things they do.